Amara arrived at the law firm, wearing the same green dress she'd saved for special occasions, the fabric stretching gently over her growing belly, her heart hammering so loudly she could barely hear the receptionist's greeting. She had tried to ignore the emails, the letters, the unknown number that kept calling, but eventually curiosity and a quiet, persistent hope that maybe, just maybe, this was something that would change her child's future, forced her to make the trip. The office was all glass and steel, with polished floors that reflected the world above them. She felt small walking through the long hallway, her worn flat squeaking softly, but she lifted her chin, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. Inside a large conference room sat 3 people in suits, a thick file open on the table. Ms. Amara Okafor? The oldest of them asked, standing to shake her hand. I'm Mr. Hayes, please. Have a seat. She sat down slowly, nerves thrumming through her body. Is there a problem? She asked. I don't really know why I'm here. Mr. Hayes smiled gently, his expression unexpectedly kind. You're here, he said, sliding the file toward her, because you are the sole heir of the late Mrs. Adays, Okafor, known to you as your aunt. Amara's breath caught. Her aunt. The quiet, soft-spoken woman who used to visit with small gifts and big hugs, who always smelled faintly of jasmine and paper. Heir? Amara repeated, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. Another lawyer nodded. Your aunt was the majority owner and chairwoman of AO Holdings. She managed her affairs very privately, which is why you likely didn't know the full extent of her wealth. Upon her passing, everything, her shares, properties, accounts, trusts, has been left to you, her only remaining blood relative. The room tilted. Amara gripped the edge of the table. How much is everything? She whispered. There was a pause, as if they were preparing her for impact. Based on current valuations, approximately $10 billion, Mr. Hayes said quietly. For a moment her mind went blank. 10 billion didn't even sound like a real number. It sounded like a typo, like something out of a movie. She thought of her tiny room, the leaky ceiling, the nights she'd gone to bed hungry so her younger brother could eat. She thought of clocking in early and leaving late at the grocery store, of counting coins and praying they'd stretch to the end of the month. She thought of Daniel telling her she had nothing, of his cold eyes as he walked out the door. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she took a deep breath and placed a shaking hand on her belly. My aunt never told me, she said softly. Mr. Hayes nodded. She chose a simple life for herself. She wanted to protect you from the dangers that come, with wealth until you were strong enough to handle it. She left letters for you, as well as instructions. She wanted you to know that she believed in you, not just as an heiress, but as the kind of person who would use this fortune wisely. He pushed a sealed envelope across the table. Her name was written on it in her aunt's familiar, looping handwriting. Amara's heart broke and healed at the same time as she held it. Over the next few weeks, her life transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Lawyers moved like ghosts, signing documents, transferring ownership, unlocking accounts she'd never heard of. She visited sprawling estates she didn't know existed, saw her name on property deeds and company papers. Each step felt surreal, like she was walking through someone else's dream. Yet she remained strangely calm, anchored by the life growing inside, her and the memory of her aunt's gentle voice. In the letters she read late at night, use this to build, not to destroy, one letter said. Use it to care, not to control, and never forget where you came from, even when those who once looked down on you want to stand beside you. News of the mysterious new owner of AO Holdings soon rippled quietly through the upper echelons of society, masked in confidentiality agreements and corporate reshuffles. The truth slowly trickled out. The old chairwoman was gone, and a young woman no one seemed to know was now at the helm. Daniel heard the first whisper at a Voss cocktail party, murmured between sips of expensive champagne. Have you heard? The Okafor Empire has a new head. Some young woman, no one's seen her publicly yet. Inherited everything. 10 billion, just like that. Another man laughed. Imagine that. Some random girl wakes up and suddenly owns half the city. Daniel's chest tightened, a vague unease stirring in him. Somewhere, a memory of Amara's surname brushed against that rumor like a passing shadow. But he pushed it aside. He had other things to think about. The Voss family had embraced him more fully now. Leonard discussed investments with him. Cassandra asked his opinion on expansions, and Elise had upgraded him from amusing outsider to serious candidate. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the estate's manicured lawns, Elise took his hand and said, My parents like you. I like you. I think we could build something incredible. Together. It was everything he had wanted to hear. Yet when she leaned in to kiss him, a flicker of guilt stabbed him, the image of Amara's tear-streaked face flashing through his mind. He pushed it away, telling himself that what he'd done was necessary, that love without money was a luxury he couldn't afford. Months passed. Amara's belly grew and so did her strength. She hired advisors who treated her with respect when they realized she had no interest in being a silent figurehead. She asked questions, studied late into the night, learned to read balance sheets and contracts. She kept the grocery store job for a while longer, not because she needed the money, but because she needed the closure. One evening after work, she walked through the aisles and quietly bought the store, instructing the law firm to switch ownership and increase salaries for the staff. When the old owner found out, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Why would someone like you want this tiny place?" he asked. Amara smiled faintly, running her fingers along the worn counter where her old life had once begun. "Because this tiny place is where someone taught me that kindness matters more than titles," she replied. "And I want the people who work here to feel that." She stood taller now, not because of the money, but because she'd remembered who she was beyond the pain. The baby inside her kicked more often, full of life, as if sensing the future waiting ahead. The invitation came on a crisp, clear morning, delivered in an elegant cream envelope with embossed gold lettering. At first glance, Amara thought it was just another corporate gala or charity function. But when she read the names printed in perfect calligraphy, she froze. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Elise Voss and Daniel Cole," it read. Her breath hitched. Daniel, her Daniel. The man who had told her she had nothing. The man who had walked away from their child to marry wealth. Except now, unbeknownst to him, she had more wealth than the entire Voss family combined. For a long moment her emotions wrestled, hurt, anger, heartbreak, disbelief. Then something inside her shifted. She laughed, a soft, incredulous laugh that turned into a sound almost like a sob. Of course he had invited her. He had no idea who she had become. To him, she was probably still that poor girl from the grocery store, the one he could use as an example of how far he'd come, the mistake he'd left behind. Maybe he wanted to show her what she'd missed out on, to parade his success before her eyes. The cruelty of it made her chest ache, but another part of her felt strangely calm. "Will you go?" her lawyer asked gently when she showed him the card. Amara placed a hand on her belly, feeling a soft kick. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'll go." The day of the wedding was bright and sharp. The sky an endless, unblemished blue. The Voss estate had been transformed into a fairy tale venue, white, flowers cascading over arches, golden chairs lined up on the lawn, a string quartet playing something soft and elegant. Guests in designer outfits mingled, exchanging air kisses and compliments. A helicopter hovered in the distance, a symbol of opulence, while luxury cars glided up the driveway. Daniel stood near the altar, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, smiling at guests, his eyes occasionally flicking toward the path where Elise would soon appear. On the surface, he looked like a man who had it all, but deep inside, whenever he let quiet settle, he sometimes felt a hollow space, a ghost of a life he'd abandoned. He always silenced it quickly. Today was not a day for ghosts. He didn't see her arrive at first. People turned their heads, whispers rippling through the crowd as a sleek car pulled up and bodyguards in black suits stepped out, scanning the area. The door opened and Amara emerged, wearing a long, elegant green dress that hugged her pregnant belly. Her hair pulled back in a simple, regal style. She held a small clutch in one hand, the other resting on her stomach, and walked with a calm, steady grace that made her look like she belonged there more than anyone. Conversations faltered. Some guests gasped. Others pretended not to stare as they nudged each other and asked in low voices, "Is that her? The new AO heiress?" The bodyguards flanked her, not because she was afraid, but because the world now knew her value and was all too eager to get close. As she walked down the aisle, not as a bride, but as a storm, her eyes met those of the women in colorful, traditional outfits seated on one side, some of whom recognized the quiet strength etched into her posture. Daniel, laughing politely at something Leonard said, turned casually to follow the crowd's gaze, and his world stopped. For a heartbeat, he thought he was hallucinating. The woman walking toward him looked like Amara, but not the Amara he remembered. This Amara radiated power, serenity, and something that felt like justice wrapped in silk. The green dress, the confident stride, the subtle lift of her chin, it all collided with the memory of the girl he'd left crying in a tiny apartment. His mouth went dry. "Amara?" he breathed, barely audible. She didn't flinch. She kept walking, her expression composed, eyes locked on him with a calm that terrified him more than anger ever could. Behind her, a helicopter hovered, a silent witness to the moment. Elise, still inside the mansion putting the finishing touches on her makeup, hadn't yet emerged, unaware that a hurricane had just stepped onto her wedding lawn. When Amara reached the front row, she paused, turning her head slightly to take in the elaborate decorations, the flowers, the luxurious chairs. It was beautiful, she admitted to herself, but also hollow in a way, like a stage built for a performance that had forgotten its script. Slowly, she turned her gaze back to Daniel. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stretch between them. "You look surprised," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach him. He took an involuntary step forward. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I invited you because—" she raised an eyebrow. "Because you wanted to show me what I lost?" She finished for him. He flinched. Some nearby guests, pretending not to listen, leaned in just a little closer. Daniel swallowed hard. I didn't know you would actually come." Amara's lips curved into a faint, almost amused smile. "You underestimate me, Daniel. But then again, you always did." Leonard Voss approached, offering a polite smile. "Miss Okafor," he said, extending his hand. "We are honored you accepted our invitation." Daniel's head snapped toward him. You know her?" he stammered. Leonard gave him a puzzled look. "Of course. She's the head of AO Holdings. We've been discussing a joint venture for weeks now. Didn't I mention her name?" Daniel's stomach dropped. The conversations he'd overheard, the mysterious heiress, the fortune, the name that had brushed against his memory and slipped away. AO Okafor, Amara Okafor. His knees felt weak. He turned back to her, horror dawning on his face as the truth slammed into him. The woman he had abandoned because she was too poor, the woman he had dismissed as baggage, was the very person the entire elite circle was now desperate to impress. "You're the heiress," he whispered. Amara tilted her head, her eyes glinting with something halfway between sadness and triumph. "I am a lot of things," she said quietly. "An heiress, a daughter, a mother, but most importantly, I'm someone you decided wasn't worth standing beside when you thought I had nothing." Silence fell around them like snow, muffling the rustle of dresses and the murmur of gossip. Daniel opened his mouth, searching for words, but for once, his charm failed him. He saw himself now through her eyes, not as the ambitious hero of his own story, but as a man who'd traded love for a mirage of status. "Amara, listen," he began, stepping closer, his voice shaking. "I made a mistake. I was scared. You thought money mattered more than people," she interrupted gently. "You thought leaving me would open doors. And maybe it did, for a while. But the funny thing about doors, Daniel, is that some of them are only temporary. Behind them, the music shifted as the quartet prepared for the bride's entrance. Bridesmaids lined up. Elise appeared at the far end of the path, radiant in white, smiling as she prepared to walk toward her future, unaware that it was already unraveling. Amara looked at Elise for a long moment, then turned back to Daniel. "I didn't come here to ruin your wedding," she said calmly. "I came because you invited me. I came to show you that the nothing you walked away from turned out to be more than you could have ever imagined. Not because of the money, but because I learned to stand on my own." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked hoarsely. For a brief moment, the girl who had once loved him more than anything flickered inside her, remembering nights under street lamps and shared dreams. But then she remembered the coldness in his voice when he'd called her a burden, the way he'd chosen his own pride over their child. She took a deep breath. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting," she said softly. "I forgive you, Daniel. Not for you, but for me, so I don't carry your choices like chains. But we will never be what we were. You left us, and now I'm building a life where my child will know they were always enough, even when their father decided they weren't." Elise had reached halfway down the aisle when she realized something was wrong. The guests weren't looking at her. Their eyes were fixed on the front, on the pregnant woman in green. The bodyguards, the strained, devastated expression on Daniel's face. Her steps faltered. "What's going on?" she called out, her voice tight. Daniel turned, caught between two worlds, and for the first time, Elise noticed the way his gaze clung to Amara like a confession. "Who is she?" Elise asked, her smile cracking. Leonard and Cassandra exchanged tense glances, sensing the storm. Amara stepped back slightly, not wanting to be the center of their collapse. But the truth had already spilled into the open. "She's the one I left," Daniel said quietly, voice breaking. She's the mother of my child. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Elise's bouquet trembled in her hands. You didn't tell me," she whispered. "You lied." Daniel reached toward her helplessly. "I was going to explain, No," Elise snapped, tears springing to her eyes. "You were never going to explain. You wanted my family's name, our power, and you thought you could hide your past like a stain." She turned to Amara, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You didn't deserve this." Amara nodded once. "No one does," she replied gently. The wedding unraveled right there on the lawn. Elise tore off her veil and handed the bouquet to a stunned bridesmaid. "There will be no wedding today," she announced, her voice cracking but strong enough to carry. Guests whispered furiously, some already pulling out phones they were not supposed to use, eager to feed the gossip machine. Leonard looked furious. Cassandra looked humiliated, and Daniel looked like a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse into dust. Amara stood quietly, feeling her baby move, a reminder that while their chaos swirled, her purpose remained clear. She turned to leave, her bodyguards falling into step beside her. Daniel lunged forward. "Amara, please," he begged. "Give me another chance. I can be the man you deserve. I can—" She stopped and faced him one last time. "This was never about what I deserved," she said softly. "It was about who you chose to be when you thought no one would ever see. Now everyone sees you clearly, including me." She paused, then added with a quiet, bittersweet smile, "You once told me you didn't want a life worrying about rent and groceries. Congratulations, Daniel. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm not the poor girl you left behind. I'm the woman who walked away richer in every way that matters." With that, she turned and walked down the aisle in the opposite direction, passing rows of people who now looked at her with a mix of awe and admiration. The helicopter blades whirred louder as she approached, the roar drowning out the murmurs behind her. Before she stepped into the waiting car instead, she placed a gentle hand on her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay. We always were." As the vehicle pulled away from the ruined wedding, leaving the chaos and whispers behind, Amara looked out at the wide, open road ahead. Uncertain, yes, but hers. She had money now, more than she could ever spend. But more importantly, she had something Daniel and the Voss family, with all their power, clearly lacked: integrity, resilience, and a heart that refused to turn cold, no matter how much it had been broken. And that, my friend, is where you turn to your viewers and say in your own voice, if this story touched your heart, made you feel something, or opened your eyes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that real value isn't measured in money, but in how we treat the people who love us. Your support helps me bring more powerful stories like this to you. So join the family, subscribe now, and let's keep growing together.